evening program on this day of consecration of the new Bigelow Chapel. Our subject this evening is Sacred Space, Common Ground, and our distinguished panelists, moderated by Linda Mack, will explore the intersection between the spiritual, the architectural, and construction as reflected in this sacred space. My task is the pleasant one of introducing our moderator, Linda Mack. Linda is a person of distinguished background in many areas. She graduated from the University of Chicago with a BA degree in Russian civilization and received her master's degree in European history from the University of Minnesota and passed examinations for the PhD in Russian history.
Did you have to bring that up?
We'll see. For the past 8 years, Linda has been the architecture critic and reporter for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. And in that capacity, she covers issues relating to the urban and suburban landscape, such as the design of new buildings, the preservation of historic buildings, and planning for dynamic and people-friendly environments. Linda has received many awards for her work in journalism. Linda is also a trustee of this seminary, and we here at the seminary, in the course of the design and construction of this building, have benefited greatly from her knowledge, experience, and insight. We are very grateful for that. In addition, there are windows which you can't see from where you're sitting, but there are what we call lantern windows above the ceiling and recessed back on the east side of the chapel. They're called lantern windows. And just a brief story about those lantern windows. When we were going through the construction process trying to control our budget, the question was raised, should we eliminate the lantern windows and thereby save a bit of money? And Linda said, no, we cannot sacrifice the lantern windows. We must keep them in this building, and I will see to it that they are appropriately funded. And she has done that, and we are grateful for that, Linda. And sometimes
I'm not used to being talked about.
It is suggested that she be referred to as Lantern Linda. But we prefer to think of her as our esteemed and wonderful friend, Linda Mack.
This is very hard for me to be talked about. I'm used to doing the talking or writing about. Welcome. It's delightful to be here. I should make clear at the beginning that, yes, I am the architecture writer for the Star-Tribune, but tonight I have the joy, really, of not being an unbiased, supposedly neutral observer, but I got to be involved in this process as a member of the board and of the chapel planning committee. I started out when this project was just a thought, and have been able to watch the amazing unfolding, literally kind of unfolding of it. And so it's a joy for me to have that opportunity to really be somewhat more involved and to be involved in such a wonderful project with such wonderful people. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and I'm going to ask a few questions, and then we're really going to open it up, because I think you all probably have lots of questions and comments too, and so we don't want to make this stuffy and boring. We want to make it really participatory for everybody. But I will introduce our panelists, and I'm going to start with Wilson Yates, who probably most of you know, the distinguished president of this institution and a leader in religion and arts in the United States, or internationally, really. And so I think it's a special pleasure for him to have been involved in the creation of an astounding piece of architecture as he has served this institution. And Joan Serrano and John Cook are a very distinguished, dynamic team from Hamel Green and Abrahamson. They're our local star architects. And as Joan describes it, Joan is the art and John is the science of making buildings like this happen. And they were selected from a group of about 5 architects. We won't name the others. I know that's not a good idea. And but I will give Gail Graham Yates credit for really bringing them to our attention and noting their wonderful work on the Weissman Art Museum, where they were part of that team. So, and have gone on to do many other things like the Barbara Barker Dance Center at the University of Minnesota. And Tom Schwab was the project manager. Is that your title?
Superintendent.
Project superintendent with Mortensen Construction, Mortensen Companies, that's the proper name, right? Mm-hmm. And he's the guy who made things happen, everybody has told me. And that was a challenge, as we shall hear more. And he said he's worked on a few other small jobs, like the expansion of Dulles Airport and the Denver Airport. And if you have ever driven up in the parking lot or the parking ramp at the airport, you've driven up the helixes that he worked on. So he's been nominated for canonization here at UTS, and that was noted this noon at the dedicatory worship service. So I would just actually ask each of you to introduce your role in the project and kind of how you came to be involved. I'm going to start with Wilson and then you all and then Tom. So how did this start for you?
Well, it started as an idea that a lot of people in this institution had, and that was the obvious one, that we needed a chapel. We didn't have a chapel. We had a room that served that purpose and served it as well as it could, but it's a room without windows, and it was a multi-purpose room. And the idea became a possibility with Molly McMillan's offer of a lead gift. And the community responded to that, and then the planning committee began. And as president, I was deeply involved in this, and Jonathan is the vice president for development and the personal representative of the institution to the architectural firm and the construction firm, was deeply involved in it. And sometimes we compared notes about what happened at 3 a.m. in the morning when we wondered what had we gotten into.
Okay, Joan and...
My name is Joan Serrano, and I was the project designer for the chapel. I'm just so excited to see it at night. This is the first time I've seen it, because of the summer, it's really late when it gets dark, and I keep looking around thinking, oh, this is kind of cool. So I'm just really excited. Sorry. So I together with my partner John, we worked on the design, and we've really enjoyed the experience.
John Cook, and I first heard about this project from Gail at a social gathering, and when she mentioned a chapel, I had this little voice inside my head that was a cousin of mine who is also an architect, older than me, and who I looked upon for advice, and he advised me never to do a church. Because they never have enough money and they always meet at night. And And I'm very happy to say that neither one are true. But I knew Gail from our experience at Wiseman, and I knew that if Gail was telling us this is one that you should really consider and look at, that's exactly what we should do. And
you remember my response? Well, John said, John, we've got to go after this chapel project. And I said, absolutely not. There's no way we're going after this project, because at the time we had so much work. And I'm like, I don't want to hear it. Just put it out of your mind. So, John, I think it was a week or so that you were just kind of like, oh, you should look at it. So, anyways.
Well, then you went after it with gusto, I would say, as I recall. Yes. And Tom, how did you hear about this and get involved?
Well, some of it's just a matter of pure timing, which superintendent goes where. And a little bit of it, too, is maybe what each individual soup is kind of good at, or supposedly good at. And I seem to have a knack for getting into things that are a little more intricate or a little more thought-provoking and things like that. So, thoughts in a lot of ways.
That's a nice way to put it.
So the timing kind of worked out, which was good, and I was placed on the job.
Great. Well, we'll bring you in a little bit later, because now we have to talk about the design. Although Mortensen was brought in very early on the design, right? So after the conceptual design, would you say?
I think it actually was during the schematic design phase. Mortensen was, which we enjoy, because working with the contractor, we can get a pretty good estimate of costs and look at ways of. I mean, Mortensen helped us tremendously on conceiving how to do these wood panels. So we typically like to do that.
I walked in today with Tom Schmall, who is also here somewhere. There's Tom, who was the project manager from Mortensen for the pre-construction services, and he opened up his little electronic calendar and showed me July 31st, 2001, first meeting with Joan and John on Bigelow Chapel. So they've been with us really from the very beginning, and they've been very instrumental in making this happen.
I'd like to make a comment about that process of selecting both Mortensen and Hamill Green, and these people have been referred to. The selection in part came from the imaginative ideas they had and how they would work with this school. But I think mostly it came from the fact that Joan said, and it proved true of Joan and John and Tom, we want first to hear what you want. And this was amazing for the committee. And so we talked about what we wanted. And she would press on that over meetings. What do you want it to say theologically? That's my language. Or spiritually? What do you want it to say aesthetically? What do you want it to be in the life of the community? So that from the very beginning, it was a conversation between an architect and architects and a builder and a committee. And the evolution of that wasn't controlled by anybody, but somehow was evolving through all of the voices.
That is very true, and that's not always true with architects. So that's my editorial comment. Sorry, I have to stop doing that. Forget my role here. Well, what were the factors that kind of the have-to-be's and the wanna-be's, Wilson, when you were thinking about this chapel? And I think you might need to bring your mic a little bit closer.
Well, it needed to be a space that was, in our language, a sacred space, a holy space, a true chapel for the worship of people in this community. And we wanted it very much to be a building that had a distinctiveness to it, if you wish, a building of signature architecture that would speak to the larger public. And I firmly believe then, and firmly believe now, that guiding this project was an idea that we could create a building that would contribute to this whole part of the world, a unique and important building of religious architecture, at a time when often works of religious architecture can be relatively mundane and almost stamped out. And so that's what we hoped for, and that's what I think we have.
And I remember, tell us about your initial design thoughts, because I think, as I recall, that the committee really figured they wanted a circle. They wanted a space that there was sort of this is a very circular kind of place, right?
Let me tell one thing about that. You know, what she had done is the Barker Dance Studio, and has curves in it. We wanted curves. We wanted curves and spires and delicacy and graceful buildings. And she said to us in one of those early meetings, she said, I don't want a shoebox. Well, okay, we don't want a shoebox. We want curves. Then she came in one night, one afternoon, and she said, I have a shoebox. And we said, without really saying, where are the curves? And she said, we have to carry on a conversation of strength with these strong buildings that are so grounded in linear and horizontal and vertical, and therefore this has to have that kind of line. But she said inside it will be curvilinear, and so it was.
Yeah, that's exactly how it happened, because actually a lot of times, a lot of architects, I would say, design from the inside out. I think it also makes clients feel better if they're knowing that it's designed from the inside out than the outside in. But to be honest, a lot of our projects are designed from the outside in. And part of that is to root or ground the building in the larger context of the site. And so I do think that because of our previous work, which is very expressive, and a lot of it is very curvilinear, I think there was an expectation in that first design meeting that this was going to be very expressive architecturally. And so I did get the feeling in that first design meeting that there was a little bit of, I don't want to say disappointment, but maybe just curiosity about how it would evolve, because we came to the table with none of these curves. Just a model of the outside showing the relationship to the existing campus. And frankly, I might have said it was going to be curves, but we didn't really know if it was going to be curves. And then 3 weeks later, we came in with this idea of the curve. But, for me, it was the juxtaposition of the straight lines and the curves that eventually evolved. But again, the straight lines of the exterior came about with and a lot of our work does this. I don't like architecture that looks like it kind of landed from outer space. And every curve I put, and we had some really expressive angular ideas for the outside. They just looked so unbelievably foreign in the context of this campus. And this campus is a challenge. I mean, it's a wonderful seminary, but architecturally,
it sucks.
These are my words, but I think she thought this. I think she thought that if she designed what we were saying, this graceful little curving steeple that would rise to the heavens, that it would be like God's toothpick, and she wasn't going to build it. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
See, this is what I'm going to miss. I mean, I have to say that working with this group, and I'm not just saying this, but it has been the most incredible experience for us, because people like Wilson, people like Molly, people like Jonathan, the whole committee, there was an amazing sense of trust and respect for us. That, all of our clients don't necessarily have, you don't feel that. And so even, having that first initial model of relating to the exterior campus, you allowed us to keep going, which for a lot of architects is really important because the ideas eventually evolve. So I have to say that I think I have so thoroughly enjoyed working with Wilson, and I think you can tell that. But anyways, so it was very much designed from the outside in.
I'm glad to hear somebody actually admit that.
I know nobody will admit that really, but
was there an aha moment?
Well, there was for what's funny is when we interviewed for this project, we did come to the table with some models, little concept models. And really we do that not to show them what the design is, our clients, but for our clients to understand how our creative process works. And what's funny is usually the interview models get thrown away right away. They really don't become relevant to the final. But in this case, I had always been intrigued from day one with this rhythm of planes, these glass planes that kind of shot across the length of the facade. And that showed up in the interview model, and it continued to be an idea that intrigued me. And then on the inside, eventually we kind of were dealing with this shell. And so we knew we wanted to insert kind of a double or a wrapper, some kind of inner shell into the inside. And we tried angles, we tried square, rectilinear. And by the way, I don't know if Steve Dwyer's here, but the team at HGA was very small. It was John, it was an architect named Steve Dwyer, and me, so I'd like to acknowledge Steve because he did an amazing job. But and so, John, Steve, and I would critique, and and I do have to say that there does come a moment where it's like, this is it. And sometimes it's weeks of being really frustrated and just seeing a lot of really bad stuff. And I did a sketch that showed, it was just a simple pen sketch of this curve. It was just exactly like this curve. And I looked at it and I thought, this is kind of interesting. And Steve modeled it. And he brought it up to my desk, and I'm like, this is it. And what's funny, don't get mad, but both John and Steve didn't really like it. They were kind of like, oh, this isn't it. And I'm like, yes, this is it. This is absolutely it. And then, of course, then I get insecure because I'm thinking, okay, Steve and John don't like it. Is it any good? But I was like, no, I think this can be good. So there was that kind of this singular gesture. And again, the roots of that were, I was trying to design a space that was very intimate. Again, the whole idea of spirituality and what makes a space spiritual was something that I had given a lot of thought to. And when I think of spirituality, I think of beauty. I think of intimacy. I think of light, and I think of space. And so those things really influenced the design. And this idea of even moving down, if you notice, we moved down into the chapel, which is very unusual for a religious project. I think initially some people on the committee thought we'd move up, and the chapel would sit on a plinth or a base kind of above the garden. And one of the things that I felt really strongly about was that I wanted this chapel to sit on the same plane as the garden to the west. And the difference, there's about a 5-foot grade difference. The south entry is 5 feet higher than this. So the only way to do that, instead of building it up, is to move gently down. So the idea of intimacy was really a really important part of this. And then this idea of these curving panels I keep talking about, what I really have loved about today is that I've probably heard 5 different interpretations of this design and of these walls. And it's really fascinating to hear. And what I thought about was this idea of a cocoon, kind of a womb, almost, very female. I've talked about the exterior being more male, the interior being more female, and that juxtaposition. But again, this environment that just kind of embraces you.
Does that explain the egg-shaped lights over there? I've been wondering about that.
Okay, I had never... John, you can take that one.
Actually, I want to ask Tom what he thought when he saw this idea, because you were going to have to help make it happen.
Be honest.
Oh, jeez. I mean, when I first saw the blueprints, and luckily enough, there was some time for preparation before we broke ground.
Did you go into the meditation garden?
We probably should have done that piece first, so I could have used it quite a bit during the construction. Oh, boy. But no, I realized from the get-go that it was going to be an interesting and difficult structure. And, you know, as you go along and you get feedback from people here and the architects, that it's going to be kind of an above and beyond. I mean, even asking all the subcontractors and everything to really try to put their best foot and their best people forward. So you got the drift right away that this was going to be interesting.
Note the word interesting.
Yeah, right. Would you like to elaborate on that? Tell us about one of the trickiest things you encountered.
Well, the thing is, there's kind of quirky things wherever you look in this structure. I mean, the obvious ones are the wood panels, which are just kind of an out-of-the-world thing and have never been done.
Yeah, would somebody explain what they are, really?
Yeah,
yeah, John, tell us what they are. And then...
Let's see.
If he can't explain it, then nobody can.
The reason that I gave the reaction I did when Joan did this little model was I knew that we were a long way from having it built and conceived of, so that was my skepticism. But Joan had come across a small sample of wood veneer that was very similar to this. It's a quilted maple that is rare, and there are lots of people trying to find out a whole lot about how this happens in a tree. And what we know is that it's probably some kind of disease or virus in a tree, in a big leaf maple tree. And probably the biggest challenge was Joan's idea of taking this thin wood veneer and keeping it thin so it's bendable and thin so it's translucent, but yet protect it from light and water and UV and the like, and have it not delaminate. And we experimented in our shop with just kind of gluing it to glass, gluing it to plexiglass, and we weren't very successful. So again, Tom Schmall helped us. He said, I know a guy that knows a guy that that maybe has some experience with this.
That's reassuring.
But it was a start. Maybe not reassuring, but it was a start. And actually, he hit it right on, because he led us to a guy named Mark Sanderson from Wilkie Sanderson, who has experience doing the wood that you see in dashboards of fancy cars. That is real wood, and he knew all the secrets of how you keep a piece of wood from delaminating in the Arizona desert after 20 years on a dashboard. So we went to him and said, okay, this is what we want to do. Tell us how to do it. And he, after many, many, many experiments, dozens of experiments, many of which failed, but we came across this system where it's a simple piece of wood veneer that is the quilted maple, and finding the tree is a whole other story.
Yeah. And how thick is this?
It ends up being about a 32nd of an inch thick. And it's sandwiched between two pieces of acrylic. One side is a satin finish and the other side is not. But the sandwich is made up of a sheet of acrylic, a liquid epoxy, the veneer, more liquid epoxy, another sheet of acrylic, and then it's pressed in a plywood press for 12 and a half hours or some specific amount of time that they figured out under so many pounds per square inch of pressure, and then cut into shape. And this panel he put a piece on the roof of his shop, and I think it's still there, so this is after 2 years. He sent it to a testing lab for UV and heat and delamination. We melted it in an oven. We literally burned it. We torched it. We torched a panel to test for flame and smoke spread. And all the results we were pleased with.
And Tom Schmall kicked it, I heard.
And Tom Schmall kicked it one day. And it didn't break. That was a good test.
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Tom, but I thought, so this was one of the trickiest things.
Yeah, but everywhere you look, there's tricky things. Sometimes a lot of my memories will be what's behind the skin here. Mm-hmm. It's a lovely skin. Over there, there's 4 sprinkler heads in that hallway. It took a guy 2 days to put them in.
Wow.
And normally in a building this size, you'd wipe out the whole thing in 1 day. So just getting pipes from here to there, fitting everything in, routing stuff, was just as interesting as some of this stuff on the exterior to me. Mm-hmm. So whichever wall you look at, there's stories that I'll always remember. And the precast now, like on the outside, that looks just kind of so simple and so regular. I mean, the foreman I used to almost want to run when he'd come to try to find me. Because every place you go, there's so many different materials to fasten to and things like that, and unique deals that a lot of the stuff that's hidden are things that I'll remember the most too. And whatever, so hydronic covers, right, John? Little pieces of sheet metal up there. Mm. It is amazing the thought process that went through that cover that's used to heat the skylights up there.
Oh, wow.
Tom is a master of making jigs. I don't know if any of you work with your hands or with tools or cabinetry. A lot of times to do something right, like drill a hole in a particular place, you have to make a jig to know where to put the hole, and then you do it over and over again. And Tom has made more jigs on this shop. There should be a museum of jigs for the Bigelow Chapel.
It could be kind of an art display along the gallery there. Well, I'm going to ask one more question and then open it up, but it is kind of a big question. So this is stone, this is wood, this is drywall, glass. What makes it sacred? And I feel it is.
Well, it's a theological question you raise, and everything can be sacred if through it we encounter God. And so the tree and the stone and the baby and the building and the chair and the face can potentially be sacred if there we encounter the holy. Now, what you're asking is, yes, but this is a specific space. And so we make it holy like any finite and limited community makes anything holy. We create a space which affirms somehow we are related to God and we believe God will be manifest in the space, but we don't decide that. And we do it by using symbols such as a cross or a communion table or a pulpit. We use it by walls that hark back to very early church architecture. And so we create a space that looks like a religious building. And we create that space in the hope that it will become for the people a place where they encounter God. But then you have to have the people who want it to be sacred, who open themselves to receiving that erratic and amazing and mysterious movement of the Spirit. And then finally, I think you have to say it. You have to name it. This is a sacred space. This is a chapel. This is a place where we come to worship God, and by God's good grace, we receive the touch of God. So what makes it a sacred space? The people, the way we design it and the symbols we use, the intentions we have. And there are probably a lot of different answers to that.
And that was a wonderful answer. Thank you.
I'm not touching that one.
Oh,
after
okay.
that.
All right. Okay.
No way.
Well, let's open it up for questions or comments. Any thoughts about this place? Yes, Duncan.
Your use of art stone in a sacred space leads us right into what you just talked about. There's an artistry in the way in which this all fits together. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you, over time, discovered how this all fit together so that it qualifies with what Wilson just said.
Did you hear that, or should I try to repeat it? Okay. And I hope I heard it. Did you specifically ask about the art stone?
Well, it's a question of how the art stone and the forms and the use of sacred ideas to open our minds all fits together. You have a unique coming together.
Right.
And I'm just curious as to how you discovered how all of this works together and fit what Wilson just used as a wonderful description. I'm not trying to give you more credit, but I think you deserve it.
Well, anybody want to tackle that one? How did all the pieces fit together, and what?
Well, it's very much an evolutionary process in terms of how all the pieces fit together. You have ideas about initially form and space, and a good example is the wood. What I wanted in a space was one that felt very warm and very intimate. So you say, okay, what are the types of materials that give you that sense of warmth and intimacy? And wood always does that for me, but the added element of light coming through the wood makes it even more, I don't want to say sacred, but ethereal, because you've got light filtering through a material that you really don't ever see, and it's such a beautiful material, versus glass. So I think a lot of it is understanding the ideas that you're trying to get across, and then how does that manifest both in architecture and materials. The glass, the idea was that you had this very nurturing, embracing shell, which is the wood. But then a really important part for me in terms of spirituality is this idea of light. And that light almost penetrates through this wood envelope in a kind of repetitive way, almost like a meditative pattern. And so light not only gives you a sense of warmth, but it also ties you to the heavens and it ties you to the earth. And for me, the earth is embodied in nature. And that's why this window is very important with the view of the musclewood tree. Because in our initial designs, the original configuration of the seating is to actually face the cross. And the idea there is that as you're sitting looking towards the stone and the cross, you're also looking out at the tree and nature. Because for me, I see God in nature. So it's that kind of duality. So it's trying to express some of these ideas of warmth, of light, connecting to nature, connecting to sky. The important thing with these skylights is this idea of being able to see the weather, see the snow, see the rain, see the sunlight, see the clouds. And it also kind of takes us beyond where we are now. So I think a lot of it springs from an idea of things like intimacy, warmth, space, beauty. Beauty is a huge motivator for me. I love beautiful things. And for me, when I think of, this today with Philip Brunel, if you think of what makes a space sacred. And for me, it's almost moments. When I was sitting there listening to the round, I decided, I don't sing, but I just decided I wasn't even going to try to sing, and I was going to listen. And I closed my eyes, and it was a transcendent moment for me. It just was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. To hear these voices in this environment with the acoustics and the resonance, and for me, that's a sacred moment. So those are the kinds of things that I think we were trying to get at, and luckily, I think it's worked.
And in contrast to the transparency of the glass and wood, we have the cast stone, which really begins to ground the building in the earth. And one of the other underlying concepts is that the stone walls cradle the building on the ends, the tower on this side and the narthex on this side. And I think that's the contrast between the two is a very powerful statement.
And I think that's a very profound point in terms of the religious life. You have to have in the religious life dynamic and form. You have to have stability, solidness, rootedness, groundedness, and you have to have movement and spontaneity and the unexpected. And they are not separate. They are interacting. And you see, I can say that as a student of theology, but the architects gave us that by taking, in this case, for example, the power of the stone and the movement of light which comes in. I think it's very important that every religion in the history of religion that has been studied has used light as a sacred symbol. And certainly in Christianity, it becomes a sacred symbol, a symbol of God. Christ is the light of the world. The symbol is, the light is the symbol of the Spirit moving. And what the architects did, and this is back to your question, what the architects did was give us a space and a building in which that sacred reality could come in and move among us.
Gail?
We've talked about these 2 points before, but on this question, and you need not be theological, you don't want to, but you can do whatever you want to. But as the responsible builder, I heard you talk about how fine the details were, and the stonework was one of them. And then when it was finished, you compared it to So if you talk about those two parts of making it happen, and then how it affected you when you had achieved it, both making the stonework work. I know you had lots of subcontractors and other workers who put the stone together, but that's one of the pieces of you. And then also the foundation, you said, was hard work.
Yeah, I mean, even here, I'm kind of known as Mr. Concrete. And there really isn't a shred of gray concrete showing. But yet, that buried foundation was intricate, perhaps not as intricate as the wood panels up there. But even that is what holds the building up. And getting all that so those little details fit, so that columns were at the right elevation, anchor bolts are in the right spot. I mean, it's what holds everything together. A building is only as good as its foundation, is the old saying. So even there, it's kind of surprising the work we all did on that simple gray substance that's all but buried now. And working through it together, I mean, it was very much a team effort. I mean, it's not that things didn't get, hey, maybe a little tense at times. And even towards the end, I mean, it's like, boy, am I going to make this? But all along, I mean, even talking about this sacredness and stuff like that, maybe a little too, it's like there was a lot of workers who really put a lot into this building. And maybe that'll pass on through, too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like I really kind of feel that way, too, that I really kind of left a part of me here. So even that simple gray concrete foundation, not simple gray concrete, but whatever, it's all buried, it's out of sight. Yeah. But yet there's a lot of my kind of heart and soul in that stuff, too.
Yeah, to say that Tom was in the details is really an understatement, because one thing that we pressed with him from the very beginning was exactly that if the foundation is right, everything will fall into place. And he took that to heart, and he redrew on his own computer the entire foundation plan, and found a few errors, some just maybe 1/8 of an inch off. But this was representative of the kind of care that he put into the project. Is he would call us and say, I have a conflicting dimension here, and it's 1/8 of an inch different from yours. And I'm thinking, you're pouring concrete, Tom. It's okay.
So the question was about the glass fins on the outside. Are they recalling buttresses for him?
Well, I didn't literally think of buttresses when I did it. But what I was, again, as I explained, if you've got this kind of wood shell or kind of womb-like space, and that it somehow is being pierced by light from the windows and light from the skylight. These glass fins actually accentuate those incisions. And with those, and also you'll notice on the outside especially, there's a planar geometry. This is not about forms that you then penetrate windows. It's all about a series of planes. And so even the windows that are kind of slicing through the space are manifested in these series of cantilevered planes. And again, if you look at a lot of religious architecture, there is a very strong rhythm of either buttresses or windows or walls, and again, I think of it as a meditative device. There's a very strong rhythm. And so those cantilevered fins are signifying these kind of light penetrations, and then it's also a very modern, contemporary material. It's a relatively new product. And the fact that it's an inch thick, it's 2 half-inch pieces of glass laminated together, makes it look very contemporary, very light. Where a buttress is very heavy and very grounded, it's masonry. This is very light and very almost ethereal. And the glass we used was a low iron glass, which if we had used just regular clear glass, those would have been really dark green. And because we took the iron out, we didn't literally take the iron, but the iron is out, it's low iron, it kind of has that very pale green. So it's almost a white glass. So that was really important too.
Just have to share one thought from, I was here for the dedicatory service at noon, and it was very fun to see the procession go by as it came in the front door. Yes, sir.
I was really struck today by this light that we talked about, Wilson, and we had so much of it, but it wasn't intense in the sense that it took you one way. It surrounded you without being overdone. But I had this one almost pragmatic question. And you started off by talking about the clear story, with the east light and the Easter concept. The question I came up with, who's going to clean it?
Who's going to clean them, John? He's very tall.
We've already weeded the meditation garden, so I'm thinking cleaning the windows is...
How about the roof? The glass up there. You didn't make little cleats
It's
for
a
the
pragmatic
window
question.
washers?
It's for Tom.
Oh,
Well, even here, as you look at those skylights, keep in mind that you have basically a flat skylight in Minnesota on a roof that's that long, and how do you keep it from leaking? I mean, I was pulling my hair out for about 2 months trying to test that roof for leakage, finding little leaks, getting people to fix them. So even there, yeah, water kind of sits on them. Sometimes you can kind of notice it, sometimes you can't. But just the kind of heartache and worry, actually, a little bit about keeping snow, ice, rain. Because at first I looked at that, and this is one of the first things at the beginning, too, when I saw the skylights, how flat they were. It's like, oh, no.
I think your words were a little different.
Yeah. I think we
It
have...
was a holy word.
Yes. Water.
The wood panels are studied visually and symbolically. Is there anything more to say about them functionally?
how about acoustics? The question was, is there anything functional about these wood panels, apart from their aesthetics?
Airflow, acoustics, obviously light.
Yeah, I can think of at least 2 things, and acoustics is one. The shape of these curves does not match the original design. They were originally designed with a little bit sharper curve, and it was a single curve from the ceiling to the floor. And we hired an acoustician who examined the space and concluded that that single curve was going to be a problem acoustically for us. That it would reflect sound. Acoustically, it's a very reflective surface, being hard. It would reflect sound back to approximately ear level, whether you're sitting or standing. And one adjustment that he asks that we make is we make it a double curve, that it curves down on itself at the bottom here. It's a double curve at the top, but he was focusing more on the wall. So that's one functional aspect of them. The second is it provides a fantastic light filter for sunlight from the west. We have a behind this is a full glass wall, and without it, without the wood panels, we would have solar gain that would be more than we would normally want to have. So it's a really beautiful filter for light in the afternoon.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you orient those panels with the maple trees from which they came? I mean, trying to figure out, did the maples grow up in big size and grow up and down? And are these panels, I mean, how do you cut those from the trunk of the tree? Or are they a whole bunch of pieces?
Oh, good question, because there's a good story there. The question was about how do you orient the panels from the trees? Oh,
Maybe Tom and I can share on this, but the veneers come from a single tree, a big leaf maple tree that we believe originated somewhere in Washington State or Oregon.
So the diameter is huge.
It's a big tree. To cover this full space in one tree means it was quite a big tree. As I said before, you don't know that you have this type of pattern or figure in the veneer until you actually cut open the tree. So it was milled in the northwest part of the U.S. The log was shipped to Germany, where it was cut, and it's sent to Germany. The Europeans have more advanced slicers or peelers than we have here, at least for now. And this type of veneer is if this is the log, it's sliced tangentially, I guess they call it, this way. And some logs are peeled, some logs are sliced through the middle, but this is sliced this way. So you take the veneer slice, which ends up being anywhere from 6 inches wide to 12 inches wide. For the lengths varied from 3 feet, short ones, to maybe 6 or 7 feet, long ones. I guess some longer than that even. And those are trimmed and then assembled in full sheets like this. So that one of these panels is made up of, I would say, maybe 8 sheets of veneer that is attached together. The people that put this stuff together, they do phenomenal work. I mean, this is what they do. It's sort of like the person that coordinated putting up the precast stone. This is what they do, and we let them do what they do best, and they do beautiful work when you let it happen. So,
one of the things we did do, though, was after the Wilkie Sanderson did all these panels, I think there were a total of 98. Was it?
I think close.
98. They took photographs of every single one of these panels, and we did compose them. They were graded in terms of A, B, and C. So A was the best quality, and they were here. C was over there, because again, we needed the best quality for the ones coming through the light. We wanted a quilted pattern, so some were a little darker than others, so we made sure and spaced the darker ones kind of like a quilt. And then the one thing we did do was we made sure that we looked at the photographs very carefully that there weren't any weird patterns. Because we were looking for the devil face or, that. I mean, it's true.
That could be an assignment for class.
And we were looking at one, and John said, I see a monkey face. And Steve was like, I see a monkey face too. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't, but somebody else will. So we just flipped it around. And the minute you flip it, you don't see the face. So we kind of did a weird,
Well,
search.
we are really getting the inside story here, folks. Any other burning questions? Sir?
Yes, I got a question about the crosses. You got an outside cross and an inside cross. Now, who designed them? Did the architect do that, or did the contractor do it?
Who designed
We did.
The whole church built, and the contractor built this
that's good to know, but who did it
I'd like
here?
to give credit to the contractor, but no, we did it. It was, when I thought about the cross, what I wanted was, in a lot of churches, or synagogues, we're actually working on a synagogue now, the symbols are actually applied on top of the architecture. And what I wanted to do was build the symbols into the architecture. So the idea here was that the cross on the inside was an incision. The cross on the outside was a projection. So there was this kind of solid juxtaposition between solid and void. So the crosses were very deliberately conceived.
One more, Mary?
This is kind of a speculation rather than a question. I have loved being part of a community that can take risks because we know who we are. And I think that's what we've done here. And I think we did fairly well in that old chapel that was ugly, sacred space. We get but I love thinking about how this beautiful space will help us think more, know more about who we are as well. It's just, for me, kind of a hopeful thing to think about. I just love it.
Well, thank you very much, Mary. And Penny?
So many wonderful things have been said here tonight. If there's going to be some way of capturing all of this, and second part of that question, is there going to be an article written about everything
Yeah, Linda.
Well, let's see. There has been a video made, and how is that available? It was on television channel, cable TV last night.
It's going to be available through the seminary. It's going to be news to the seminary. But Lynn, who's the tech person here, is going to have some copies made of that video. There are also raw material videos of the architects being interviewed and Tom Schwab and Tom Flood interviewed much more late than more tonight. And those, Lindy will have them, and they might be available for production as well. But the short video, the half-hour one that was broadcast last night, will be available before long through the seminary. Keep checking our website.
Oh,
is that captured in words? Because some of the language tonight.
yeah, it has been wonderful. And
Some of it is, some people did repeat some of the things they said.
as for an article, I can't write about it because I'm on the board and have been involved with this. But I'm hoping that there will be an article in the Star Tribune, and I'm sure the architecture magazines will be stamping it up if they haven't already. And the word will spread, I do believe.